morning, students. We have Math Lesson 116 on May 15th, 2020, your last lesson of the week. All right, today we are finding common denominators to add, subtract, and compare fractions. So as you can see here, we have common denominators, 1/4, 3/4. Their denominators are the same. Here we have 1/4, 1/4, and a half. Their denominators are different. So we need to compare, add, and subtract fractions. We have to have the same denominator, all right? So we have been building up to this point by finding and learning about the least common multiple. So when we are looking at 1/2 and 1/4, we know that the least common multiple is 4. 4, they both go into 4, and so 4 will become our denominator, all right? So in this example, in one of Katie's cookbooks, a recipe for salsa calls for 3/4 cup of chopped fresh cilantro. A salsa recipe given to Katie by a friend calls for 7/8 cup of chopped cilantro. So which recipe calls for more cilantro? Well, I have 3/4 and I have 7/8, right? So when I'm looking at 3/4, I am looking and I see, always look at the denominator first and see if one of the denominators could be the least common multiple that they both could go into. All right, so because 4 does go into 8, right? And so to get to 8, just like when we were doing those other problems, I would put the denominator out and put the 8 out. Now, 4 times 2 is 8, just as they have here. 3 times 2 is 6. So you have to multiply them both by the same, and you get your denominator of 6. Your denominator of 8, but then your fraction of 6/8. Well, which one is larger? 7/8 is larger than 6/8, correct? So we find that the recipe from Katie's friend calls for more cilantro than the cookbook, all right? Let's read our little box over here. Why do fractions need common denominators? What does it mean to add fractions with common denominators? Well, common denominators make fractions simpler to add. It's easier to figure out. So when adding or subtracting fractions with common denominators, you are adding or subtracting the same portions, the same pieces, the same parts. All right, so it's necessary to find the common denominator. All right, let's go to example 2. We have 1/4 and 1/2. All right, so since they have different denominators, one is a 2, one is a 4, we have to find the least common multiple of 2 and 4. Well, right away we look and we know that 2 goes into 4. So I'm going to put my 4, just like they have it here, and I'm going to multiply I'm going to think, okay, what goes into 4? 2 times 2 is 4. Then I have to multiply the top number, the numerator, by 2 also. So 1 times 2 is 2. So when I go to add, it's much simpler to add 2/4 plus 1/4, and you get 3/4, correct? So you've been doing a lot of work to build up to this, so don't let it get you down. You can do it. All right, so here we have 3½ subtracting 1 and 1/6. We have 2 different denominators. Right away I look, will that go into that? Yes, it will. How many times will that go into that? It'll go in there 3 times, right? So I will multiply 2 times 3 to get 6, and I will multiply 1 times 3. Whatever I do to the denominator, I need to do to the numerator. All right, so then I have 3/6. It is much easier to subtract 1/6 from 3/6. And I get 2/6. I subtract 1 from 3. I get 2, and I simplify, reduce. You guys are the experts on this. And I have 2 1/3. My last example, I am going to add 1/3 plus 1/2. For this problem, we need to rename both of the fractions. Because guess what? 2 doesn't go into 3, and 3 doesn't go into 2 evenly. The denominators are 2 and 3, so we find the least common multiples. All right, so when I'm finding the least common multiple, You can either lay it out or in your mind you may know. I could go 2, 4, 6. Here I could go 3, 6. Do my multiples. My least common multiple is 6. So I need to change both fractions. 3 goes into 6 2 times. 3 times 2 is 6. 1 times 2 is 2. 2 goes into 6 3 times, right? So 2 times 3 is 6. 1 times 3 is 3. Then to add those two together, I get 5/6. And that makes it much easier to add. All right, we are on to the lesson practice. For problems A through C, we're going to find a common denominator and compare the fractions, okay? So the first part says Bart spent 7/12 of an hour on math and 2/3 of an hour on reading. So guess what? I look at my 7/12 and I look at my 2/3 and I think they both go into 12, correct? So I'm going to change my 2/3. I'm going to put my 12 over here. How many times does 3 go into 12? Yes, you're right, 4. 2 times 4 is 8, so I have 8/12. All right, I am going to compare my 7/12 to my 8/12. Much easier comparison, correct? I have a frog in my throat. There we go. And 8/12 is larger than 7/12. All right, I'm going to get rid of that so that I have more space to write my next problem. All right, now I'm going to compare. So it means that Bart spent more time reading, right? All right, so copy these fractions and replace the circle with the correct comparison symbol. I have 5 and I have a 3. Well, guess what? I'm going to write that down here. I have 2/5 and 1/3. I need to look at, those are terrible. I need to look at factors for 5 and factors for 3. All right, so 5, I go 5, 10, 15. Ooh, I'm going to stop there. 3, 6, 9, 12, 15. There we go. There's my least common multiple. So I need to get my 2/5 and my 1/3 with denominators of 15. All right, so all right, how many times does 5 go into 15? 3 times, correct? So I have to multiply both of these times 3. 2 times 3 is 6. Now I go down here. How many times does 3 go into 15? 5. Multiply both of these times 5. 1 times 5 is 5. All right, so when I'm comparing 2/5 and 1/3, I know that my 2/5 is larger, right? My 2/5 is greater because 6 is greater than 5. All right, I'm going to get rid of all of that mess. All right, so when we go to compare fractions, the next one, it says the twins took turns carrying the tent up the mountain. Larry carried the tent 5/10 of the distance and Barry carried it 2/4 of the distance. Who carried the tent further? All right, so I have for my multiples, I have a 10 and I have a 4. I need to find their least common multiple. So I go 10, 20. I think I'll stop there because I know that 4 goes into 20, right? 4, 8, 12, 16, and 20. All right, so my least common multiple is going to be 20. So I'm going to put 20 here, 20 here. All right, so I am comparing the fractions of, let's see, I'll erase so that I can see that better. 20 and 20. So I'm going to compare 5 tenths. Well, 5 tenths with a denominator of 20. I would multiply 10 times 2. I would multiply 5 times 2. So that would be 10 twentieths, right, for my 5 tenths. And then my 2 fourths, I would be going 2 fourths to 20. I have to multiply both of these times 5, correct? All right, so 2 times 5 is 10. Voila, guess what? 10 twentieths and 10 twentieths. Guess what? It says, who carried the 10 farther? Neither one of them, because their numbers were equal, correct? 10 twentieths and 10 twentieths when you're comparing it. They did the same distance. All right, so our next problem that we are going to work on are the problems on the bottom. It says, for the problems, find each sum or difference. As you work through the problems, follow these steps. All right, so we are going to do, we find the common denominator. That's our first step. All right, so when I look at this, I know that 2 and 8 both go into 8. So first thing I do is I have 1/2. I need to make this, find the common denominator that has an 8. 2 times what equals 8? 2 times 4 equals 8, right? So then I have to do 1 times 4. So I am going to do 4/8, which is completely logical because 4 is half of 8, plus 1/8. And what do I get? I get 5/8, correct? All right, this is number 1. Or A, shall I say. Okay, B. I'm looking at these two numbers. Oh, this is D, and this is E. Okay, E, I'm looking at the 2 and the 4. Well, I know they both go into 4, correct? So I'm going to take my 1/2 and find the denominator of 4. All right, I know I have to multiply both of these times 2. 1 times 2 is 2. So I'm going to take 2 fourths and subtract 1/4. And what do I get? 2 subtract 1/4. 2 subtract 1 is 1. And the denominator stays the same, 1/4. Well, let's do F. All right, so F, as you can see, I have a 4 and an 8. I know that they both go into 8, right? So I need to change that 3/4 into some with a denominator of 8. So I know I multiply 4 times 2 to get 8. 3 times 2 is 6. So I have 6/8. Or I have 6/8. Now I need to add my 1/8. So 6/8 plus 1/8 equals 7/8. Correct? That is F. All right, I'm going to do one more. I'm going to skip over to this one that doesn't have easy common denominators, right? So I'm going to erase F and I'm going to do H. H, I need to find the common denominator, correct? Of both numbers. So H, I'm going to have to change both because I have 3 and 4. So I need to think, what do 3 and 4 both go into? So 3, 6, 9, 12. Oh, I think I can stop there. This is 4. Oh. I'll write that a little neater. 4 8, and 12. All right, these are going to be our common denominators. So I have 1/3, and I am going to find the common denominator. I'm going to have the 12. Okay, 3 times 4 is 12. 1 times 4 is 4. Then I'm going to look at the other problem, 1/4. Find the correct common denominator. 1/4, 12, so I'm going to go 4 times 3 is 12. 1 times 3 is 12. Or 1 times 3 is 3. All right, 1 times 3 is 3. So I will have 4/12 plus 3/12, which will equal 7/12. All right, I should have done this on a piece of paper today. All right, so finding the common denominators, right? We need to find the common denominators. All right, today I haven't been doing your mystery word, but today I am going to have you work through problems 1 through 27. All right, 1 through 27, those are your magic numbers today. All right, you don't have to do the last 3, which are pretty hefty problems. All right, good luck.